This is Blacklisted News Radio right here on the Oracle Broadcasting Radio Network. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's the 16th day of July, 2010. It's Monday, and my name is Doug Owen. You can join me online at blacklistedradio.com. Tonight, we are going to start the show with our special guest. His name is Michael Cross. He has a book that I highly suggest all of you listening to this program get. It's Freedom from Consciousness, Melanie's Journey. You can get it at amazon.oraclebroadcasting.com, as many, I'm sure, other places locally as well. We'll talk about all the places you can get the book. Michael Cross, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Your book and the work that you have done, of course, has been very intriguing to me. I've listened to you, and of course, Michael, many of the listeners of this radio program probably listen to other shows that you have been a guest on. But I just find the idea of psychopaths in government to be very compelling, considering looking around the world today. You know, so many of the things that we see just don't make sense. You just wonder, how can it be this cruel and unusual? And I think that your work has done a lot to really highlight that. So please tell the listening audience a little bit about yourself and your work.
Well, I guess sum it up real quick. I'm an instructor of psychology and international finance, originally from the great state of Oregon. But then I met a Swede and decided to take the plunge and to relocate to Sweden and try it out. And that's where I've been ever since. And
sounds like it worked out.
Yeah. I just, don't ask me that during the wintertime. But yeah, I basically started doing instructions in topics dealing with personality disorder. And most of my students are, 18, 19, 20 years old. And so you can get into this area of things like serial killing, but also political psychology. And I started noticing a great deal of overlap in the traits that you would associate with being a successful politician and the traits that you might find in these serial killers. Now, I will note that when we go on here with psychopaths, there's a very, 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 very tiny percentage of people with psychopathic personality wind up to be serial killers. But all the serial killers pretty much are psychopaths. But the thing is that you'd see these people, these killers, and they have, most of them, probably all of them, had this great ability to get people to believe in them and trust in them and take risk. And of course, they would lose in the end. But the personality traits that a psychopath has makes it somewhat easy for a person to seduce an individual and to get an individual to trust them. Now, in politics...
And you would think it would be the exact inverse.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think a lot of people have the Hollywood image of the psychopath. The crazy guy living in his mother's basement and clipping stuff out of the newspaper and posting it on the wall and so forth. And that's not a very good image of what a psychopath is. And if you actually look up what the traits of a psychopath are, a good place to start for those just starting would be Robert Hare's psychopathic checklist.
Right. Hold right there, Michael. I hate to interrupt you, but we have to take a quick, hard break. We'll be back with more. Our guest is Michael Cross. You can check out his work. We'll tell you where on the other side. Don't go anywhere. It's Blacklisted News Radio program. And we are joined here in the first hour with our special guest, Michael Cross. He has a book out that explains why psychopaths are just so compelling to people. I think that's one of the most interesting aspects, and why you actually wrote this book, you were telling me during the break, is because I think that we have so many just incorrect beliefs about what it is to be a psychopath and what those traits actually mean in society. I think that a lot of people would believe that they would be able to identify, maybe visually or even after having an interview with a psychopath. Most of them would be able to, or would think that they would be able to identify a psychopath. And from what you're telling me, that might not be the case.
No, no. I'll just really, really briefly touch on some of what Hare's traits are. Not all of them, but just to give you the idea.
Right.
First of all, superficial charm is one of the traits. Now, everyone likes to be charmed. I mean, no matter what, you like it when someone tells you all the wonderful things about yourself.
Sure.
And psychopaths are very good at that. They're also very grandiose. They have a sense of, not only entitlement, but also a sense of destiny, which, again, that's something we're drawn to people that have this sense of being driven and having this desire, this goal, even if it may seem outlandish, that still attracts us.
Well, look at Charles Manson. He had some pretty outlandish schemes, and people still fell in love with him and thought it was a great idea to follow along with his message.
Oh, yeah. He had no trouble getting recruits. They're also very thrill-seeking. They hate to be bored. They don't like tediousness and monotony. And again, you have someone enter your life who is someone that wants to kind of take you on a thrill ride. That is going to attract you to someone more so than just someone who's kind of an average person or is boring. And they tend to be somewhat impulsive, which, again, it might be one of those things like, well, if you're in, I'm kind of still centered on the interpersonal level of the kind of person who would say, let's just go do something really crazy. We get attracted by that. Now, the darker side to this personality, of course, is that they also do not, I think this is the number one trait, is that they have little or no empathy. That doesn't mean they don't have sympathy, but they don't have empathy. They don't have that sense of really connecting to someone. If
not capable of love, I mean, not capable of really putting somebody else before them because of this self-entitlement, this grandiose, visionary kind of belief system that they have.
I think you define it there very, very well. If you define love as being able to put someone else first, they don't have that. If you define love in somewhat of a very basic sense, like the love that a lion would have for its cubs, or an alligator would have for its babies after they hatch, they might have that. So there's kind of you might even have a strange sense of loyalty that these people may have, but it's not going to be the kind of love where they're really going to identify with you. So if you're sick and your husband or wife is a psychopath, and they're saying, well, I really know what you're going through. I really feel for you. And they can be very convincing, but then at the same time, they're mimicking it. They're making it up because they really don't have that.
What you said in the first segment there, they can tell you they're good at telling you what you want to hear, and painting that picture so that it somehow behooves them to do that, or it's advantageous for them to do that to get to their goal. So I could see that, seeming that they're very sad and hurt by this, but still just having that cold, dark heart where it's really kind of a disconnected feeling.
Well, I use that kind of, I've used this analogy before in interviews that, let's say you have a psychopath and they have a good friend, and this friend, they've planned a fishing trip for the weekend. They've rented a cabin, all these other things. And the guy finds out that his friend has just gotten killed in a plane crash or something. The person with a psychopathic personality, they may not be sitting there thinking, oh man, I'm really sorrowful. How could I have this loss? Like most people would. the first thing that may come across their mind is, gosh, who can I call now to go fishing with? I don't want to go alone.
Right. We need to replace that person, that I guess cog in their wheel, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. So they're the kind of person that can go to they can go to their best friend's funeral and at the same time be thinking, well, his wife's pretty attractive. I wonder if I have a chance with her. I mean, they're thinking that while they're at the funeral. Now, most of us would feel like, well, this is a horrible person. I don't think this person is going to have any real success in life, and that is actually opposite the case. Ultimately, these kinds of people, if we look at the corporate world today, that goes back to that old, like, what was it they termed in the 1980s, the old Harvard Business School of Ethics. They usually put that sarcastically. And then what we want in a politician, we kind of are looking for someone who is going to be that hired gun, that person who's just going to get in there and they're going to win, they're going to succeed. I mean, that's what we're looking for in a very predatory capitalist society. So therefore, this is why they tend to rise.
So, in something that you said just moments ago was about these guys being visionaries and these grandiose ideas. And I think that that's something that a politician has to be able to embody and articulate and sell and create a platform. And, of course, find all of these people, be able to coordinate and bring those people together, the money mechanisms to be able to push them forward. I mean, you really have to have this self-important, righteous opinion of yourself to push forward. I think a lot of people reluctantly, you do have statesmen that reluctantly take position, but those are few and far between compared to most of the politicians that we see today exhibit some of these traits that you have of course highlighted and documented in your book. Hold right there, Michael Cross, live from Sweden. We will be back. Michael Cross is our guest. Very interesting research he has been doing, and we're talking about psychopaths and politicians, and Michael is a teacher talking about some of these serial murderers and killers, something that inspired you to write these books and actually to look into this more was the reaction that your students had to these personalities.
Well, yeah. I remember I showed a documentary about Richard Kuklinski. He's nicknamed the Iceman because he'd freeze his victims and then put them out in the forest. And, there'd be like 6 months afterwards, they'd find the body. And, of course, he had alibis. And
sure.
So he'd get away with it. But I started noticing a lot of the female students, particularly the really bright ones, were saying, wow, he is so cool. And I had a couple I even said, I would so date that guy. And I'd be like, this guy's a murderer. And then he'd be like, yeah, but
he will freeze you and let you die slowly. Oh, I'd like to hook up with him. That sounds like a good idea.
Well, one thing that's kind of interesting was they also would mention that they'd bring out the fact, as the documentary would point out, he was married, had 3 kids, and he seemed to be very close to his family. I mean, he wouldn't hurt his family, but he had no problem, skipping out from a family get-together, go out, do a hit, and then come back and proceed like nothing had happened.
Yeah, and one of the things that you said a lot of your students had was maybe a little admiration for somebody to be able to do that. I mean, think about that in life, how advantageous that would be. If you could just put emotion to the side and not have a conscience, you could do anything you wanted, no matter how horrific to maybe even people that you loved, if it was going to benefit you. I mean, those are things that I could never do because I would have to, live with myself. I have to sleep at night, and that would torment and haunt me if I did something horrible and hurt somebody in my family and or a friend or just some innocent human being that has done nothing to put me in imminent danger of harm. So I could see how people can kind of maybe not respect it, but kind of envy that to a certain extent.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're someone who's very shy and you, if you're a guy, you never get a girl, that sort of thing. Have it because you're so you don't have a good feeling about yourself. You don't have that
Confidence.
yeah, the confidence. Then these kind of guys seem very like, wow, how can they do it? How can I be that way? If you look at it, if you look at like an archetype sense, I mean, not someone who the character killed anyone, but if you look at like 2.5 Men, when it was we had Charlie Sheen on,
Hmm.
he displayed many of the characteristics of a psychopath, and every woman I know thought that he was just so cool, even though he was displaying characteristics that they would hate their husband to have. Subconsciously, they were thinking, "Oh, he is really awesome." So, and, and there's something about, maybe it's the fact that we're taught to repress all of our evil fantasies, all of our all those bad feelings we get. We learn that from day one. Because one of the traits psychopaths have is they don't have guilt. And they can have remorse, like, oh my gosh, why did I put that money into that investment and the business went under? But they're not going to have any remorse putting money into stocks that they know are funding some horrible thing if they make money off of it. So there's no guilt. Psychopath has no guilt.
Is that because ultimately the goal is much bigger than that individual action, so they can do whatever it is because that goal is so much higher than even themselves?
Well, yeah, that, as well as the fact that they are thinking totally, you could say, cognitively, intellectually. They're not thinking in the sense of emotions. And
Just
so,
cold and calculated.
yeah, I mean, they may have those wants. I mean, they may want to have someone in their life. They may want to have a family. They may want these other things. But it's going to be to maximize their existence. It's not going to be that kind of feeling of, oh, what can I do for this other person? It's going to be what, or if they think that way, they'll be thinking, oh, that person's so lucky to have me in their life.
Right.
And that's what I mean when I was seeing the way people reacted to these people with these characteristics. I thought it'd be really kind of cool to create a fictional book that would actually try to accurately portray how a psychopath would feel from a first-person narrative, very similar to what was his name, Alex in Clockwork Orange, where he takes you through his experiences and you see the world through his eyes. That's what I tried to do, and I decided to go with a female character instead of the traditional male killer type of a character, and then I got the idea that the name, for instance, Freedom from Conscience. When you read the book, it actually explores the way she thinks. And so she sees this as an advantage of not having these emotions that hold her back. In fact, without giving too much away, when she does let a little bit of emotions get in the way of things, that's when things fall apart for her. So this is trying to present the way a young female psychopath who's turned to vigilante serial killing, when she's introduced to it by someone she's close to, how they would actually think, how they would rationalize this, how they would be able to judge the world. And so I think it's to me, it's kind of an interesting way of presenting what this personality is without it being just a cold, clinical, this is what they do, or I'll just go on from there.
We're speaking with Michael Cross, author of Freedom from Conscience, Melanie's Journey. And it's a profound discussion because I think it relates to modern day politics in so many other ways. It's not just the politicians themselves that are psychopaths, or at least display some of these traits that make them grandiose and allow them to be able to just spew endless amounts of lies and do it with no compunction whatsoever. But also the people that vote for them. I mean, when you look at the psychopath, it's not so much the politician. Sure, you have a few that you can choose from, but the people continually go back to the the psychopath that they end up, I guess, kind of identifying with, ending up with a Stockholm syndrome, if you will.
Well, yeah. The thing is that first of all, the psychopath again will tap into energies that the average person will repress. I mean, you look at it from Freudian standpoint, the child at a very young age develops that whole superego, the guilt complex. When mom says don't do this when they're 2 years old, and so forth. The psychopath, for whatever reason, without going into all the clinical research, the psychopath does not develop that.
Hold right there, Michael. We'll take a quick break and we'll wrap it up on the other side with our guest, Michael, right here on Black. Welcome back. We're talking with Michael Cross, author of Freedom from Conscience, Melanie's Journey. And I thought it was really interesting the fact that you delved into fiction, or dived into fiction, to talk about this issue from a unique perspective.
Well, I think a reader can understand more when they see it presented from a fictional basis.
Sure.
There's more of that emotional bonding. The one thing that did pull me back, I have to admit this, the one thing that pulled me back, and I actually thought about not sending it to the publisher, is I got a few people, mostly graduate students, something like that, and I asked them to read the manuscript before I started sending it out. And several of the and again it was girls, but also guys, but several of the readers initially in my focus group said that they totally fell in love with the character. They had a bond. In fact, the suspense was whenever she was committing some horrible crime, they were afraid that she was going to get caught.
Sure, rooting for the bad guy. I find myself doing that in a lot of books and a lot of movies, rooting for the bad guy. Not so much because you really identify with their cause, but just because you like the system that they are thwarting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was kind of like, wow, I hope I don't inspire anyone in that way, but I don't think most people would go out and then become a serial killer because of a book. But the thing is,
no, probably not.
Yeah, the thing is, though, just the mere fact that people, again, connect to someone because they read the narrative and they're thinking, oh, well, she's got a good reason to do this.
Sure.
So they like it.
Yeah, well, it's justified, and it gives you this righteous indignation. Really, if you think about it, you can justify just about anything if somehow what you're doing is noble, moral, of God. You see it all the time.
Yeah. You see politicians do it all the time too.
Sure.
I mean, just a good example is just seeing the way that when Hillary Clinton was being interviewed and found out that, she was asked about Gaddafi's death. And I don't know if you saw the video, but she was...
We came, we saw, we killed?
Yeah, and she's laughing.
More people are going to die. Yeah, I've seen it. I've played it here several times.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm thinking, wow, that's not the way Truman reacted at the end of World War II. I mean, most of the politicians then were quite somber, at least, and
No,
respect.
she couldn't contain herself. You could just see the joy in her eyes because they were just peeled back in her head, and she was trying to maintain composure. But you could see that there was real enjoyment, something beyond, feeling, okay, well, now we're moving past Gaddafi. And, I could go on and on and on about some of the misnomers and, the egregious crimes that are being committed against the Libyan people right now, including rounding up all the black Africans and getting rid of them. So that's, the kind of revolution that has come out of the Arab Spring. But regardless, you see the light, and it's more than evident. And you didn't, at least, I didn't see that beforehand, but it might have been that I wasn't paying nearly as much attention. I mean, some of the parallels between politicians and modern day propaganda. You were talking about Bernays during the break there. And I mean, when you look at how disconnected from reality most of the ambitions that the American people have for their government and politicians, of course, only crazy psychopaths could end up as our leaders, because the people want the government to basically do everything it can, from solving world peace to empire building. And that in itself is kind of a contradiction, but that's the kind of things that people are getting behind, and they think it's noble and it's of God. I mean, you hear all of the reasons why what we're doing is okay. And it's not that it's just bad or not even, something that has to be done. It's just a cost of doing business. I mean, these people, at least, when it comes to Hillary Clinton, others in the State Department, they really seem to enjoy their job there, Michael.
Well, yeah, and the problem we have, too, is that the media, 20 years ago, the media liked to investigate things. And I think we had this image of, well, newspapers want to compete with each other for the best story, and they're always trying to dig and dig and dig. And that is not the case anymore. We're almost turning into what that term, was it Vance Packard came with the whole idea of infotainment?
Sure.
And it's almost like when you watch network news, it's almost like you're watching Entertainment Tonight or something on the Star Channel or something like that.
And I often joke that this is infotainment because we put out a lot of information. We talk about books, but there's a lot of entertainment aspect into it. But we don't lie for ratings because the world's so crazy, you don't really have to. So we're not toting an agenda here. But at the same time, I do think that this is infotainment. And unfortunately, because of the consumer society, because of some of the products of the Bernays model, that's the only way that you can really reach out to new demographics and new people. I mean, we can preach to the choir all day long. I mean, people like yourself, are very cognizant of many of these root issues and problems that we have, not just in this country, but I'm sure in Sweden as well. It's so ingrained, these ideas, these delusions of grandeur that people have. It definitely is part of it.
The one thing that Bernays contributed to this whole mix was the fact that, well, he kind of stole his uncle Sigmund Freud's insights and applied them to business. But he knew that people are mostly persuaded and connected by emotions instead of rationality. So therefore, think about that. If you can use emotions to get people to buy products, to get people to change their entire lifestyle, to do all these other things, then the people that without the emotions, without the baggage of, well, is this the right thing to be doing right now? Is this really ethical to mess with people's minds? They're the ones that are going to wind up in charge.
The killer instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, well, Michael, you were telling me during the break that you have a new book coming out in the upcoming weeks. Please tell us more about this.
Well, what it is, it's still called, it's Freedom from Conscience, but instead of Melanie's Journey, it's Melanie's Awakening. And in this, the first one's set when the character's in their last year of high school. This one's set when she is almost graduating from college. And everything just kind of comes back, and she gets back together with some of her friends. And it explores things. It still stays with the exploration of ethics and psychology and philosophy and all these other things, but also gets a little bit deeper in interpersonal relationships. And without trying to make it, it's not an academic book. It is a thriller. It's a psychological thriller. But it's something that once you finish, at least I believe, and the people that I've let read the manuscript, they say it, hopefully they're being honest, is that it still will leave you thinking. It'll get you to really contemplate a lot of issues. And again, it goes back to the whole issue of there's a constant tug of war on the issues of what is right, what is wrong, what justifies this behavior versus that behavior, and so forth. So you're left with kind of mixed emotions, I think, for the main character. You at one area, you admire a person who can basically live without the constraints of society. But at the same time, you realize, well, that's kind of dangerous.
Well, at the same time, it also makes me realize that, wanting to change the world, and wanting that to happen, we're going to have to get people in places of power that are actually have the best interest of the constituents and their respective countries, nationalities, sovereignty at heart. So I'm hoping that we can find some people that have the killer instinct, but they themselves are not killers. I don't know. That's going to be a challenge, Michael.
Maybe you're looking for kind of the Clint Eastwood archetype.
I'm going to be on the lookout for that. Hey, we have to take a quick break. Michael, thank you so much. We'll have you back on the program very, very soon. I really did enjoy it. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
And thank you as well. Keep up the good work.
All right, hold right there. I want to talk to you during the break. Guys, we'll be back in 3. Don't go anywhere. This is Blacklisted News Radio. More news on